Most of us agree that immigration in Canada is out of control, that something needs to be done to fix what's going on. And our guest today believes that he has the solution: remigration. My name is Nico Lagan, and I'm too conservative for the conservatives. My co host, Rob Ambrose, not woke enough for the liberals. We are the political orphans. Tonight on the show, we are joined by co founder and chairman of the Dominion Society of Canada, Daniel Tyrie, to speak about one of the most controversial topics in politics today: remigration. What's going on, Daniel? Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Hey, Daniel.
Yeah, it was after the conversation we had on Saturday. We had a mashup where you were part of it. You and Greg were part of it, and I did a lot of thinking after the show, and I'm like, damn, it went off topic so many times. It went all over the place. I think you can agree to that. And Rob and I were talking. We need to do something that's a bit more cozy, if you will, not as many people involved, so that we can keep on track. And this is the whole idea about you joining the show today. And thank you for joining, because I got your number from Greg today, and I texted you, and you're on the show today. So very much appreciated. Let's start from the beginning. I think we all need to start there. And I'm going to treat this as you and I never spoke before, because I want to make sure that our audience understand what the Dominion Society is all about. So let's start at the beginning. What's a Canadian?
This is one of the most important questions, and especially given how our kind of culture has transformed since the kind of 1960s. I would put it that Canada kind of underwent a cultural revolution throughout this period, where they really redefined this question. And myself and the Dominion Society, one of our key goals is kind of pushing back and putting our foot down, because things have gotten too far, and this is really the foundational kind of problem behind a lot of the mass immigration and multicultural problems we see in Canada today. So to put things simply, to me, Canada is not just a post-national zone. Canadians aren't just interchangeable economic units. It's more than just a piece of paper or citizenship. Canada is a nation, and that is to say, a distinct people with a shared history and culture. So things like ancestry, ethnicity, these do play a role in the identity of what a Canadian is. So Canadians are they're not immigrants. They're the descendants of settlers, explorers, and builders that came here from Europe, mostly from Ireland, England, France, and Scotland, and braved hostile waters and a harsh wilderness to carve civilization out of nothing, and to pass on a greater society for their descendants. So that's what a true Canadian is to us. The people that came here and settled the country from coast to coast.
So how would I identify a Canadian without knowing their history? Like, we talked about this on Saturday, and on both my mother and my father's side, we've been here for 300 to 400 years. It's a bit insane how long both of my families have been here. But you wouldn't know, like, I'm darker than the average white guy just because, I don't know. I have a tan. I'm lucky, right? But you can't really tell from just looking at me that I'm bit. Yeah. All I'm asking is, how do you identify? How do you identify what is a Canadian and what is not? Like, you must have some type of, I don't know if rules is the good word for it, but some type of guidelines that would define
to it. Then
yes, absolutely. As I just said, really, a nation is not. I see it as the kind of building block on top of the family. So you have the individual, you have the family, and then you have the nation. So yes, ethnicity is a part of it, just because we're an interconnected chain of people spanning back generations. The children and grandchildren, great grandchildren, and so on of the settlers who built this country. So as a result, ethnicity is kind of completely wrapped up in that. If you just lined up a bunch of people, it would definitely be a challenge. You'd need a very scientific background in identifying ethnicities to accurately pull out who's a Canadian and who's an Australian and who's an Englishman and who's a Spaniard and so on. But in a situation where, you can have open conversations about people's, culture and history and these things, then these things start to shake out pretty quickly. I don't know how much each of you have traveled and interacted with people from all over. But, I've met people from England, I've met people from Australia, I've met people from New Zealand. And while we have our similarities, we also have our differences, whether that be an accent or smaller cultural differences, just based off of our upbringing and kind of the culture that's built up through generations of different histories. Even though some of these countries have shared kind of ethnic backgrounds, they do manifest themselves differently over generations in different geographies.
So a big component of it is the amount of time that those European descent, because let's call a spade, Canada was built by European descent Christians, if you want to be exact about it. But there's a big component of the time that someone or their families have spent here as to how much of a Canadian they actually are, right? In your perspective, at least.
Yeah. I mean, I like to break down a few important distinctions. So first, the distinction between settlers and immigrants. There is this kind of post-nationalist notion that's pushed a lot in the common zeitgeist that everyone who's not like First Nations is an immigrant. And I think this is pretty erroneous because it conflates these two terms, settlers and immigrants. I think there's something very different between someone who risks life and limb to cross over a hostile ocean in a wooden boat, to risk everything to carve civilization out of a wilderness and create institutions, versus modern economic immigrants who come here to take advantage of our wealth and opportunity. So that's one important distinction I like to make when we're talking about Canadian historical identity. But also I break things into smaller groups, specifically what we call ethnic Canadians, and then what we call heritage Canadians. So ethnic Canadians are a group of people who came and settled mainly from France, England, Scotland, and Ireland, and who settled around the St. Lawrence Valley, starting as early as the 1600s. And over this 400 or 500 year period, these groups kind of underwent an ethnogenesis to create two unique ethnic groups, Franco-Canadians and Anglo-Canadians. And these people are really what made the bedrock of Canadian civilization, Canadian culture. And it was mostly in these regions around the St. Lawrence Valley that would become Quebec and Ontario. We make a larger distinction, what we call heritage Canadians. This includes the later waves of European settlers from not just these four founding nations, but some other countries around northern and further Eastern Europe, who helped settle mostly northern Ontario and Western Canada. But even the further west, the backbone of these these settlers were from Eastern Canada and later waves of settlers from the British Isles. So that saw Canada kind of extend its ethnic identity and culture into Western Canada, around which settlers from places like the Ukraine and Poland and Germany and Netherlands came over in significant numbers, but kind of assimilated into a strong kind of backbone around the ethnic Canadians who kind of made the majority in those areas as well. So we call these two groups kind of the later generations of settlers in Western Canada, as well as the ethnic Canadians from the St. Lawrence Valley, as heritage Canadians, the people that built this country rather than immigrated to it.
Rob, did you have something to say here? Because I can carry on.
I've got a question for you, Daniel. Yeah, I know you can go forever. Okay, so that's I appreciate those definitions. I mean, one thing that we're big on here is, always defining your terms before we talk, because we need to be sure that we're even talking about the same thing. So I definitely appreciate that. So You guys, now the word remigration is, I'm sure you know, a loaded term, and I've heard different things from different people. So maybe you could tell us what that means for you. What, like, specifically in terms of policy, things we can actually do. What do you guys want? What are you advocating for?
Daniel, before you get there, though, before we jump into the meat of the subject, there's still a bit of information I'd like for you to explain, because you spoke about settlers and immigrants. So before we get into what you consider remigration and what your platform actually is, what your policies are, is it still possible to be, because clearly you're using settlers versus immigrant, because you can't be a settler anymore in Canada. Right? Unless you conquer it, you get rid of all the population and then new people come over. That would be settling here. But this is not a possibility anymore. That's why you're using that word as in settler versus immigrants. Because if they're just coming over to make a better life for themselves, they're somewhat taking advantage of what's already built in order to get a better life. They're not settlers as in they did not create the way of life that we have in Canada. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the distinction between immigrant and settlers that you're using, right?
Yeah. I'd say that's pretty accurate. That being said, I don't consider myself or yourself to be settlers. Really, we're the descendants of the settlers, right? We're Canadian. Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't call myself a settler, but I think the distinction is important when we talk about the history and heritage of Canada.
But you're saying, so as a descendant of a settler, I belong in Canada, as my ancestry built the country that we know of today as Canada.
Well, if we want to talk about belonging in Canada, we'll get into that more as we discuss our actual remigration proposals. We take a hard stance on what we believe a Canadian is, and that doesn't completely line up with our policy proposals. It's not quite as simple as this is what a Canadian is, and we're going to get rid of anyone who doesn't meet this definition. I think it's very important to offer this clear, historically grounded definition of what a Canadian is, just given the generations of transformation that we've seen through that cultural revolution that started in the 60s and was really pushed by the Trudeau Senior and Trudeau Junior, to transform our identity into this kind of post-national economic units. You know, a Canadian is a Canadian, or as Poilievre would put it, anyone from anywhere can be Canadian. These are the notions that we're pushing back against. We push back and we say, no, Canadians are a distinct people with a unique history and culture, and we need to protect that. Specifically, we need to make sure that Canadians remain a majority in Canada. That being said, our remigration proposal is not as simple as everyone that doesn't meet my definition has to go. That's not exactly what we propose. It's more complicated than that, and we can start breaking into that once you're ready. But I want to make sure that's clear before we move on.
So that's a two-part question that Rob asked you. So if we address the first part of his question, and I believe that that's what he was asking, what do you consider remigration? Like as the Dominion Society of Canada, what do you guys consider remigration? And then we can address what it means and what your proposal, your policies are. Yeah.
So the simple definition of remigration is it's the polar opposite of migration. So it's the reversal of the flow. It's mass immigration. Immigration is people coming here. Remigration is people going back. It's a comprehensive basket of policies set to reverse the flows of migration through voluntary and involuntary measures in order to preserve a nation's ethnocultural identity. So as we've kind of gone through, we believe that Canada is a distinct nation, a people with a common heritage and culture. And we believe that the identity of the country is based off of that kind of ethnic core, and it must be preserved, or else we're transforming a country into something else. So at this stage, after decades of unprecedented mass immigration, the only way to preserve that ethnic identity is through remigration policies. So we offer at the Dominion Society, we offer a 10-point 3-phase remigration plan. a series of policies that we see would be the best way of achieving the goal of maintaining Canada's ethnocultural identity, really through reversing a lot of the problematic policies that have been introduced by Justin Trudeau, most importantly, but also through the previous administration, Stephen Harper, as well as Brian Mulroney and some of their predecessors. So I'm happy to start drilling into those. We only scratched the surface the other day when we spoke.
But absolutely from my side, unless it did, because that answers my question as to what you believe. The first part of Rob's question, what's remigration, saying is the complete opposite of immigration, and saying at the beginning that it is a solution to mass immigration, all fits together, so it all seems to make sense. But if it makes sense to Rob, then you can start drilling into your policies and what you guys actually believe in. But I just want to make sure that Rob's on the same page here.
Yeah, exactly. People. There seems to be a broad consensus that mass immigration has been especially through the Trudeau years, it was disastrous. But politicians don't really offer solutions to reverse and fix the problem. Really, they want to offer solutions to like deal with the consequences of mass immigration. What I'm bringing forward is, no, we can actually, just like they introduce policies to bring over a flood of people, we can introduce new policies to encourage them to return. So like we start with the most obvious, a complete moratorium on immigration, just closing the doors until we can stabilize the situation. No more people coming in through permanent or temporary pathways of immigration for at least 10 years until we can kind of stabilize the situation. The next kind of few steps would be around changing some of the incentive structures in Canada to discourage people from coming, but and also encouraging people to leave. So right now there's all sorts of social programs that support migration, as well as sort of policies that make Canada more welcoming to this multicultural kind of identity. So things like there's a program called the Interim Federal Health Program. This provides healthcare to non-citizens, non-permanent residents even. So people like asylum claimants and temporary workers and so on. And right now, as of the most recent budget released just a couple months ago, we're spending $9 billion on this program. It's ballooned from less than $1 billion to over $9 billion over the course of the last decade. And really, like, I don't see why we should be providing healthcare to these people. And even the IFHP is even more generous than basic healthcare. It offers things like pharmaceuticals, prosthetics, counseling and therapy, like things that aren't even offered to actual Canadians unless they have additional coverage. So we have this very generous program for non-citizens, and that just seems wrong to me. And it also actively encourages people to come here. People can come here, tap an app, claim asylum, even if they came here on a tourist visa or whatnot, and then they sit in a backlog system. We have almost 500,000 people sitting in a backlog of our asylum system, and all the while they can take advantage of our education system. They can take advantage of the interim federal health program. We provide them with things like hotels while they wait for to be processed, and we'll even pay for their lawyer to prove that they should be able to stay here. It doesn't make much sense to me to provide this level of financial support to people who just walk into our country and say they want to stay. These aren't even the people that like apply through the proper channels. Like, these are the people that just show up and claim that they're asylum claim that they need asylum, that they're being persecuted or whatnot. And then over this period, if they have a child, they can take advantage of the Canada Child Benefit, which is about $8,000 a year per child per year. This is eligible to any resident of Canada, not only citizens, not only permanent residents, any resident of Canada. So they're encouraged to have children and multiple children to get more money out of the state. And every child that they have automatically gets citizenship due to our very liberal birthright citizenship rules. not only do they get paid for it, then they can use this as an anchor baby so that they cannot be removed from the country, or that they can get citizenship for themselves and even their extended family. So this is a very backwards system. It's not set up in the best interest of Canadians. It's set up in the best interest of these foreigners who can come here and game the system. So really, the first stage is to close the door and to start axing all of these policies to make birthright citizenship more strict, to bring it in line with other Western countries. Like we're totally out of whack with most developed nations. It should be that you need at least one Canadian citizen parent to pass on citizenship to the child. Right now, it's anyone that comes here, an illegal, a temporary worker, a tourist, anyone that comes here, if they have a child, that child automatically gets citizenship. This is an outdated law. It needs to be updated. So this is like our bundle of policies that we put in phase 1. I'd extend it to things like strict enforcement of things like language laws. We want to adopt a lot of Quebec's positions on this. So there shouldn't be, ethnic ghettos in Canada where all the signage is in Chinese or in Hindi or whatnot. We should strictly enforce English and French language laws across the country. I would adopt Quebec's bill limiting religious symbols in the public service, be that in education or in the civil service. They're doing a lot of things right in Quebec that we can borrow and extend to the federal level. And then also, I really think our federal government should introduce a remittance tax. So this is a tax on all money leaving the country to be sent back to families abroad. There's so many families here that are just coming for their economic opportunity, and that money's not even being spent in Canada to fuel our economy. It's being sent back to India, it's being sent back to China, it's being sent back to the Philippines, and so on. We're not just like some resource colony that people can come to work and extract wealth from. Like, that shouldn't be the way that we set up our country. And I think if we clamp down on a lot of these kind of incentives, these what we call pull factors, this free government money that's propping it up, all these things that make Canada welcoming to foreign languages and foreign religions, and introducing taxes so that we can't just be taken advantage of as a resource colony. I think this will encourage a lot of people to just leave voluntarily. Once they realize the jig is up, they can't get free money, they can't send back money that they're making, and so on. They'll realize that they have no connection here. They don't want to be here. They're just here for the economic benefits. So I think closing the door and turning off all these incentives, and maybe giving them a few reasons that to be less comfortable here, they can't use their foreign languages, so on. I think that'll encourage a lot of people to come back. But that just wraps up phase 1 of our plan. Then we have some of the more kind of involuntary steps in phase 2 and phase 3.
So guys, you are listening to the Political Orphans. We're talking with Daniel Tyrie here of sorry if you correct me, is it Dominion, the Dominion Society?
The Dominion Society of Canada, yep.
Dominion Society of Canada. We're talking about remigration, which is obviously a hot button topic. It's a loaded term, and that's exactly why we're having this talk here, so we can kind of clear up. I'm going to throw to Nico here for a follow-up question, but just before we do, guys, if you are tuning in for the very first time, welcome. This is a Political Orphans. This is a place where the left meets the right, gets together, and common sense people from all over the political spectrum can have common sense discussions and actually try to have productive talks and get to real solutions. Before I throw it to Nico, I just want to say, Daniel, basically, I probably definitely would quibble with some of the things you said about at the very beginning about ethnic Canadians and stuff, and sorry, real Canadians. I think we could probably have a productive discussion there. But everything else you're saying, even though I am on the left, I am a common sense liberal. There's a few of us left. I haven't heard anything that I don't have any issue with anything I've heard you say about policy, for sure. So, this is why we have these talks, because when you actually get down to the nuts and bolts, you might see we might have more common ground than you might think. So, Nico, did you
that's
have
also why we
you
founded the Dominion Society. I get a lot of questions like, why aren't you working through the Conservative Party? Why aren't you aren't you doing things? Why did you choose to start a new organization? And that's exactly why. I think there is a cross-partisan consensus around a lot of the ideas that we're bringing forward, whether that be in the Liberals or the Conservative Party or other parties across the political spectrum. So really, we wanted to bring this kind of cross-partisan movement. We wanted to get members in the Dominion Society from across the political spectrum that agree on these two central concepts of Canadian nationalism and remigration. And then we can use that base of support to push our ideas into all the mainstream parties, not just pushing things from a partisan perspective. So I really appreciate, I think especially phase one is very uncontroversial. I know some of our ideas on Canada's heritage and ethnic identity are a bit controversial and go against the grain of the last 50 or so years. But I think you'll find that everything I put forward is based in our history.
So we will get to stage 2, we'll get to stage 3, and then we'll kind of restart the conversation that you and I had on Saturday. So on the part that we don't agree on, because like I told you before, I'm pretty much on the side of Rob right now. 80 to 90% of what you guys stand for, I'm like, it's very hard for me to disagree with it. On the contrary, this is the type of stuff we talk about all the time, and me especially. But before I just want to confirm the things that you said about stage 1. I just want to take this comment because it's kind of ironic. But Nico, you have a bit of an accent, sounds not Canadian. Why is that? You said your lineage can be tracked from Canada for 300 years. I'm French Canadian, so yeah, my families were part of the first settlers that came here. I say 3 to 4 because it might be more, but I have to look further down the road. But yeah, I'm not retarded. I don't have a speech impediment. I'm French. That's why I sound the way that I sound. Canadien, oui. Between that tired and French Canadian. Well, a bit of both. A bit of both. That being said, and something weird from column C. I just want to go back to your stage 1. So for now, it was basically around no more immigration for 10 years. I like that plan. I had talked about 2, 3, 4, 5 years to put kind of a stop and reassess. Let's say, okay, whoa, we need to stop this. Let's review all the new laws, the new policies that come in place for the past 10, 15 years, because that whole mass immigration stuff was put in through Harper policies, was utilized by Trudeau, but it is a conservative government prior to Trudeau that started this whole mess. That being said, so you talked about asylum seekers. That to me is a no-brainer. Check no, go back to wherever you came from, because now we have people flying over from India on a visitor visa. As soon as they get here, they apply for an asylum seeker, and then they're here as per the immigration minister. It went from 18 to 24 months to 3 to 4 years over the past year or so. So that's how far back it takes for one of those asylum applications to be treated. And during that time, they're on our milk. They're drinking our milk and eating our honey. So remove the asylum seeker, birthright, anchor babies. This is such a dumb thing that we still have. Makes absolutely no sense. Now, what do you think about visitor visa and international students? Because now we do have over 1 million international students right now in Canada, and a lot of them are given the opportunity to work. Not only are they international students that are supposed to have the money to take care of themselves during the time that they're here, but now they can apply for temporary work during the time that they're here, taking jobs away from the 16-year-olds that are out there, the jobs I used to go back to school in my 20s. So is that something you would put a stop to, international students, or they wouldn't be able to work? How would you handle the million over of international students that we have every year?
Yeah, so I include temporary forms of migration in that moratorium. So both temporary foreign workers and foreign students through both the TFW program as well as the International Mobility Program. I think we can continue to allow for tourism, but especially the student program, I think it needs to be shut down temporarily while we kind of crack down on the ways that it's being abused. People working when they shouldn't be, as you suggested. There's all sorts of what they call diploma mills, these like fake schools that are just kind of grifting, kind of set up just for economic benefits to give a kind of pathway to migration for these fake students. So I think we really need to crack down on these areas. Overall, I don't think the foreign student program is that problematic if it's handled properly. I don't think there's an issue with people coming from foreign countries to learn in our exceptional universities for a few years and going back home. I think that should be allowed. Perhaps we need to play with things like tuition fees. Maybe they should be increased even more. We should be limiting the amount that they can work. Certainly, if they can't afford to come here and be a student, then they're probably not. They should probably be studying back home. So I think changes to that program are required, but like in concept, I don't think it's very problematic. I do think the temporary foreign worker program and the international mobility program, I think these are very problematic programs. Not only do they they increase things like rent prices because you need a place to live. It depresses Canadian wages. Now these people that from foreign countries with lower standard of living and so on can come and undercut Canadian wages. It offers really negative incentive structures for Canadian businesses who, instead of investing in things like capital, automation, technology and stuff to make Canadian workers more productive for each man hour worked, they can just invest in cheap foreign labor, and it kind of acts as a kind of band-aid. We've seen over the last couple of decades, the average productivity of a Canadian worker versus an American worker has completely kind of diverged. Now they get much more productivity out of each American work hour versus Canadian, and I think that's caused by increased investment in capital versus Canadian businesses, which have been incentivized to invest in cheap foreign labor instead of longer term investments. So I think this program, both the temporary foreign worker and the international mobility program, I think both need to be axed completely, or at least kind of reverted to what they were initially, which was seasonal agricultural work, people that would come here for 2 or 3 months to help at the end of harvest season and stuff. This is somewhat unproblematic, but now they've blown up and people are coming here on temporary foreign worker visas to work at Tim Hortons and Subway, and it doesn't make any sense. It's just a backdoor immigration scheme. So I think they need to be shut down as well.
That on those ones, you're preaching to the choir, because that's something that we talk about all the time. I'm happy that you're talking about the IMP, because this is a way bigger problem than the temporary foreign worker by 6 or 7 times last time I checked. It's insane how bigger of a problem that it is. Yet none of the political parties are talking
about temporary foreign workers.
None of the parties are talking. You're stealing the words out of my mouth, because none of them are talking about it. They'll talk about the foreign worker, but that is not really what the problem is. The problem is really with the IMP, because it does not require an assessment of the area. So let's say I'm at Tim Hortons, I don't have to prove that I can't hire locals. I don't have to prove it. I don't have to produce an assessment. That's the big problem with the IMPs, right? That being said, so that seems to cover your stage 1, which up to now on all of this, we all, I agree, and I think Rob agrees. Phase 2. So explain to us what's your second phase, because it has to do with forcing people to do things. At least that's how you made it sound, right? You're taking steps to take people away, not just cutting the gravy train. You're actually taking more steps to physically potentially remove people.
Yeah. So phase 2, we do get into some involuntary mechanisms. I'll start off with the least controversial stuff and I'll work my way up. So we need a massive expansion in our sort of remigration forces. We need to either buff up CBSA or open a new department, a new government department, in order to enforce deportations. Right now, the government has openly said that they don't have any mechanism to ensure people leave the country. They just hope they kind of do voluntarily. They don't track it. They don't enforce it. So this is obviously not acceptable, and it's only kind of fueled these backlogs. So the first thing would be to massively expand CBSA, maybe open a new Department of Remigration or something like this, start hiring Canadians to enforce our laws. There are somewhere between 20,000 and 500,000 illegals in Canada currently. That's just according to government statistics. It could be much higher. I wouldn't be surprised at all if it was much higher.
Millions. Sorry to stop you. The last estimates that I just saw last week were about 2 million of people that got tracked, that they're supposed to be leaving and they're in Canada. They don't know where. They're not really tracking them anymore. So those are illegals. Let's call a spade here. If you're not supposed to be here, that means you're illegal.
Yeah,
let's be
a lot
honest.
of those people are on expiring visas, so they're like soon to be illegals. But they exactly throughout 2025, just this year, there was supposed to be 5 million different expiring visas. That could be people on tourist visas, student visas, temporary foreign worker visas, any of these. We need to make sure that these people can leave. So we need to have the manpower to do so. As well, we talked about, as we already talked about, totally axing the temporary foreign worker program. This would also create an international mobility programs. This would also create about just under 2 million people that need to be deported or we need to make sure leave our country. And then as well, people like criminals. Well, I mean, we're axing the asylum program. There's about 500,000 people in the backlog there. So quickly, we're getting up to 5 million, 6, 7 million people that need to be deported. So we need to have the manpower to be able to do this. And that's not even to get to things like we should be clamping down on things like crime. I really believe that anyone who commits a crime, regardless of if they're a naturalized immigrant or a permanent resident, and especially any of these temporary classes, if they're violating our laws, there's no more kind of clear metric that they're not fit to be in Canada than they're violating our laws. And right now, there's this weird 2-tier justice system. I'm sure you've seen news coverage about this over the last few months.
We talk about it all the time, man.
There's crazy cases with like Indian migrants keeping on their roommates.
Getting lighter sentences so that their immigration status is not affected. And it's like those are the people you want to affect their immigration status, right? We should be cutting them slack. Like for
exactly. If they're sentenced to more than 2 months, they can compromise their path to permanent residency or citizenship or so on. So we consistently seen these judges giving them sentences of 2 months minus a day in order to not compromise that. And just as you said, it's completely backwards. Insane. Like these people should be removed. It doesn't make any sense to be trying to limit the backlash on them because they're immigrants. Like the way that our institutions act are completely backwards. It's not in the best interest of Canadians, as it should be. It's in the best interest of this like abstract universalist individual from anywhere. We're trying to be so fair to people, and that just doesn't make sense. Like the role of our government should be to protect the interests of the Canadian people, not to be fair for the international individual. So that's an important philosophical difference. But yeah, exactly. So we want to not only deport the people that are obviously here illegally, but also to expand the kind of definition of what these illegal groups would be. So temporary foreign workers, asylum claimants, criminals, all these kind of groups need to be deported. So that's the biggest part of stage 2, mass deportations. But we also want to introduce what we call a voluntary repatriation program. So this has been implemented in many countries. It's basically offering logistical and financial incentives to have people give up their permanent residency or citizenship in order to return to their home countries. So this can be something as simple as offering a free plane ticket. We saw Donald Trump do that earlier this year, just offering free plane tickets for people to go back home. This would be very effective, especially for these groups we talked about earlier who are just here for financial incentives. Once you turn off the taps, they're going to want to go home. Give them a free plane ticket, let them go home. And then it could be scaled up. Yeah. So we've seen countries like Norway and Sweden offer financial incentives to the tune of even $10,000 to $20,000 in order to encourage migrants to return to their home country in return for annulling their citizenship. So this would be a kind of early stage in order to continue to facilitate the return of foreigners to their home country. And then finally, in phase 2, we also look to annul permanent residencies. So this is a stage on the way to citizenship. You might start as a tourist or as a student or whatnot. Once you're here for long enough, you'll graduate to permanent residency, and then eventually you'll be able to graduate towards citizenship. Some people just sit on permanent residency because some countries like India will revoke Indian citizenship if you take citizenship with a new country. So some people just sit on permanent residency, and it's not quite citizenship. You don't get to vote in our elections, and there's a few things that you don't get eligible for. But as a result, you also are not afforded with the same rights as citizens. So again, our goal is to quickly reverse the kind of damage Justin Trudeau did to the demographics of this country. So we also are looking to mass kind of revoke permanent residencies and encourage these folks to return home. Just as a way, a means of extending this, which is probably one of the more radical positions that we offer. But the way I see it is so many permanent residencies, especially over the last decade, were extended to people that it really shouldn't have been, based on these very ideological grounds. And we want to reverse that damage. So it's very simple. It's much simpler to revoke permanent residency than it would be citizenship. So that would be the last kind of stage of phase 2.
So before we, I don't know if you have any questions for that, but before we do, I just want to make sure that we mention the sponsor of the day. So this episode of the Political Orphans is brought to you by Gabble, the world's first live video debate app on the market. You can choose to sit back and watch, or if you have the balls like me, you can debate other people. They have 10 trending topics every single day. You get to debate people that have opposite views of you right off your cell phone. So just like us, Gabble believes in civil discourse, and if you're interested in trying out the app, just look in the description below. Our affiliate link is there. That being said, so we went from your stage 1, which is pretty simple, low-hanging fruits, as we call them. Cut the tap. At the end of the day, cut the immigration, stop the immigration for 10 years to reassess. Stop international students, and especially the work permits that's attached to international students, because if you can't afford to be here and live here during the time you're a student, you shouldn't be here. Because when I went back to school 20 years ago, I was in a school in Ottawa that had a lot of international students, and that was a prerequisite. It was by law, they had to prove that they had the money sitting in an account for the amount of time that they were spending here. If you did not have money to stay here 100%, they wouldn't allow you. Just like in the US, I spent half my time in the US. They ask you these questions, and if they're not satisfied, they'll have you show it to them that you do have the funds to stay for 6 months, or else we don't want you here. We don't want you working we don't want you working in the US, and in Canada being the same thing. So stage 1, I think, is pretty simple. Stage 2, to me, once again, no-brainer. Criminals, you commit a crime, get the fuck out of here. We don't thank you for committing a crime. You have identified yourself as the type of people we don't want here. So bye-bye. There should also be some consequences to those woke judges. They shouldn't be allowed to say to an immigrant that's tried to sleep with a 14-year-old that turned out to be a cop that, oh, we're going to give you a super small sentence, or just scratch that sentence just to make sure that it doesn't affect your application status. Like, get the fuck out of here. Are you kidding me? You're a pedophile. Get the fuck out of here. Go back to wherever country you came from. We don't need people like you here. So I think up to now, I agree with everything. Rob, did you have a comment? Did you have a question for stage 2?
Yeah, no, I mean, as far as policy, I don't disagree on anything. I would maybe add 1 or 2 of my own. I don't think anyone should be able to access, say, healthcare until they've been here a set amount of time, 3 years, 5 years,
10 years.
Whatnot. Yeah. Like, you have to have some skin in the game before you start getting those kind of benefits. It's a finite resource, and you haven't paid anything for it yet. It's not personal. It's no hard feelings. It's just once you pay, X amount, then you can access it. Until then, hopefully you don't get sick or buy insurance. But you can't use our shit.
Yeah,
but that's going to be part. But don't address that. But don't address that part yet. Don't address that part yet, because that's one of the questions I want. I want to let you do stage 3, and then we can talk about how you plan to reopen immigration once stage 3 has been done. Or is it even, how do you become a citizen? How do you open immigration? And what are going to be the new restrictions. So I think that fits in there. So don't steal the thunder just yet, Rob. Let him go to stage 3. Explain stage 3, because I got a feeling that both Rob and I, from the way you kind of introduced it, we're going to have questions about that one. So if you want to go with stage 3.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll start off this one with the most controversial, but we do advocate for adjusting the Citizenship Act to allow for revoking of naturalized citizenship. So similar with permanent residency, we believe citizenship has been given out to a lot of people that it shouldn't have been until Justin Trudeau. So currently, you can have citizenship revoked. It's only in cases of fraud. But before Justin Trudeau, you could also have citizenship revoked in cases of terrorism. That was the kind of Omar Khadr debate back in 2015 when he took power. They adjusted the citizenship rules to make them more secure. We want to reverse some of these changes. Obviously, we should be able to annul citizenship based off of terrorist activities. But we also believe that it should be expanded to include people who are working against Canada's national security and national and social cohesion. So things like we see, like there's been news about Canadians, immigrants acting as part of foreign gangs operating in Canada. There's news around Chinese police stations operating and enforcing foreign laws within our sovereign territory. I don't care if these people are citizens. I don't care if they're permanent residents. Obviously, they're not acting in Canada's national interest and even violating our national security. So there should be pathways to be able to revoke these citizenships and send them back to their home country. As well, we see increasing kind of tensions in ethnic communities across Canada. We've seen violence between Khalistanis and Hindus, different Indian immigrants. We've seen violence between different waves of Eritrean migrants. The newer ones don't get along with the older ones due to political changes in that foreign country. Some of the biggest demonstrations in Canada are around foreign politics, organized Muslims and Palestinians against Zionist Jews. All of these conflicts have no place in Canada. And we should be standing up for Canadian identity and these people. Like there's this massive Khalistan movement in Canada now. Just a couple of weeks ago, there was a referendum on the independence of Khalistan. I don't even know what that means. Like, do they want to establish a state here, back in India? What does a vote in Canada have to do with any of that? There was 50,000 Indians that came into Canada. 50,000 that came all over just to vote in this symbolic referendum. These people only care about their foreign country. I think they've very much proven that they're not looking to integrate into Canadian society. In fact, they're using it as a safe haven to advocate for foreign political causes. So I believe that we need to enforce social cohesion. We need to enforce assimilation. And when people are actively eroding our social cohesion, when they're working against our national sovereignty, we need to have mechanisms within the Citizenship Act in order to withdraw citizenship that really was given out erroneously in the first place under the ideological leadership of people like Justin Trudeau and even Stephen Harper and Brian Mulroney before them. So that's probably our most controversial position. People believe citizenship should be permanent. They think there's like some sort of slippery slope to pulling it away from other people. But I really think this is just common sense. The other portions of phase 3 are very non-controversial. I want to repeal the Multiculturalism Act and replace it with a National Cohesion Act. I want to make sure provinces and education systems are not pushing this kind of anti-colonial myth that frames the founders of Canada as villains in our own history. I want to push an education system that's proud of our history and identity and honest, not peddling lies that have become commonplace. And I also want to penalize institutions that took advantage of the lax immigration policies over the last decade or so. So things like the diploma mills that we already discussed, or any other NGOs that are taking advantage of and pushing mass immigration to to benefit themselves economically. I think we need to set a precedent. We need to punish these organizations, maybe disband them or whatnot, in order to make sure that everyone understands that this is the law of the land now, and we're not going to be putting up with people manipulating the system against the interests of Canadians any longer. So that's phase 3. I think it's a very common sense plan. It will reverse the demographic transformation that we've seen happen over the last 2 decades. It would probably take about 10 years to implement. But I think that's a comprehensive pathway forward. That's very positive and very clear. People like to accuse us of extremism and so on, but we're operating through the normal channels to kind of transform Canadian politics by advocating for common sense ideas and building a grassroots network in order to advance them.
Well, yeah. I mean, to be honest, I was expecting to disagree with more of what I heard here tonight. Like I said,
so it turns out that liberals are racist. That's basically all I just said.
We're all white.
I just heard from Rob, right? Yeah,
we're white supremacists.
You're all white supremacists like me now, guys.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and this is why we have these conversations, right? This is what this show's all about. As I was saying earlier, so I would probably we could have certainly a pretty decent debate about definitions of real Canadian versus not, because I see it more in terms of legal versus illegal, productive versus not productive. But all the policy decisions I heard from you, that addresses all that. That addresses legal versus illegal, addresses productive versus non-productive.
Okay. Let me pose you a very real hypothetical, Rob. So you can have a person in Canada nowadays that is born to 2 immigrants, both from India, and they live in an area like Brampton or Surrey or Northern Calgary, where they are living within a community that is 70 to 80% Indian. They speak an Indian language at home. They go to a high school that's majority Indian. This person was born in Canada. They're a legal Canadian citizen. They're 100% ethnically Indian. You think this person's Canadian?
No. I don't think they're Canadian. I don't have a problem if they are legal and they came through the proper channels. I don't have a problem with them staying if them and their parents are productive citizens. I just mean I'm not saying
they necessarily have to leave. I'm just saying, are they Canadian?
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. No, I would not say that these are what I would consider a Canadian. As long as they pay their taxes, don't break the law, they're welcome, in my opinion, in the country. As long as they are productive citizens. But no, would I consider them as Canadian as you or me or Nico? No, and that's fine. I don't think that's a bad thing either. It's not a slur on them. It's not
and they wouldn't necessarily have to leave. As we went through the plan, as long as they're not actively working against Canada's,
I was sort of looking for just kicking out all legal migrants or something. And I was like, I can't get on board with that. But if we're focused on criminals, people who are not productive, cutting off social welfare to people who are just here to be unproductive and leech off the system, I didn't hear anything that I disagreed with.
Yeah, we're not like the Peter Griffin meme with like the whiteness chart.
Yes, right.
So you don't qualify. That's
terrorist
not really what
versus mental health condition. Yeah.
Exactly. We have a bit of a more nuanced plan, but I do think it's important to put our foot down and say, like, this is common sense, guys. Like, it's just like, what is a woman conversation? Like, it's like, we can tell that this, stop gaslighting us. Like, that guy's not a Canadian. He's an Indian. That's fine.
We know what
as long as he's, integrating into our society and all these things. But let's be real.
So I have no problem with enforced assimilation, all that. I agree.
Yep, I agree with enforced assimilation too. So your stage 3 up to now, be able to remove citizenship is basically for somebody that wasn't born here. You have to be able to have a mechanism to remove citizenship because they're not integrating. Like enforced assimilation, I get it. It's hard for me to disagree with. I'd be very curious to see how that's implemented. What are the check marks to decide if somebody is assimilating or not? Because I agree, I think I'm somewhere in the middle between Rob and you, and the reason is because of some of the conversation we had on Saturday that we can now talk about. But before we do, I like to reiterate what people tell me to make sure I understood. So we're closing the borders for 10 years. We close all the cash, all the free money that's been given to people through international students being able to have work visas, international work visas, IMP. You're talking asylum seekers through visitor visa, like they came here on a visitor visa and then they become an asylum seeker. They can stay in Canada for 3 to 4 years, all expenses paid now. Then your second one is to get rid of the criminals. That's your second stage, is really take care of the people that shouldn't be here in the first place, send them back, and kind of reassess on what it is to be a permanent resident. This cannot be a continuous stage. It needs to be something, an in-between stage, as in you're either becoming a citizen or you're not. If you're not, bye-bye. You can't just milk the honey train forever on an immigration on the permanent resident. Now, stage 3, you're removing citizenship and forcing assimilation. To me, pretty much all makes sense up to now. Where you and I don't agree is the part where we're going to get into before we get. I don't know if you're done at 9. The conversation's great, so we didn't have to go over these details on Saturday, which I really appreciate that we're able to dig more into what you guys believe in. But if you have still a few minutes, there's a few questions I still have for you. And so for the people out there, we're going to go over an hour. Surprise, surprise, right? We do that all the time, but hey, just saying that we're definitely going over an hour. Yeah. But before we address how immigration would work once the 3 stages have been put in place, and I'm talking in the perfect world where all your policies are put in place and respected, I use an example on Saturday of what a Canadian was, right? To kind of define what Canadian citizenship actually is. And the example that I use is a very personal of mine because it's my situation right now. So as me, Nico, me alone, I'm as Canadian as they get as per your definition. But my wife is similar to you in a way where not her 2 parents weren't born here. Her father is an Italian immigrant that came here when he was 20, 25. He's been here for 50 years. His wife, my mother-in-law, my wife's mother, is born here, but she comes from 2 immigrant parents. They're all from literally the same place in Sicily, but they met somehow in Canada. Those fucking stories. But hey, they're all from Sicily. So her mother is first generation. My wife is half first generation on her father's side, basically. The conversation we had on Saturday is technically, as per your standards, she wouldn't be considered a full Canadian because one of her parents is not from here. Can you explain that? Because Saturday was kind of hard to have an actual conversation. Too many people involved, and there was a lot of emotions on Saturday. So can you remember the question you and I had? I kind of pushed it back again when I didn't feel you answered my question on Saturday. But I'll give you a pass because it was a fucking mess. Saturday was a mess. That's why we're having this episode again. But can you explain that one to me? What is my wife considered? What's my son considered, considering that he's only 3/4 Canadian as per your definition? And what would it mean to him in Canada? Does he not able to vote? Does he have less rights than other Canadians? So how would that work?
Yeah, I mean, by your description, it sounds to me like your wife is 100% ethnically Italian, regardless of where her parents were born. You said they were all from Sicily, even though some of her, well, on one side, her parents were born here. On the other side, they weren't. They sound like they were all ethnically Italian. It depends exactly when they would have arrived and the role that they would have played in settling this country. But it sounds like your wife is ethnically Italian and yourself, you're an ethnic French Canadian. And as such, your child would be, half Italian, half Canadian. Again, I don't think that you'd be affected by any of our programs unless your wife really wanted to get away from you and took advantage of the voluntary repatriation program and went running away to Italy or something like that. But outside of something like that,
before you answer the question, Daniel, before you answer the show,
I'm sorry.
All I'm gonna say before you answer the question, go fuck yourself, Daniel. But go ahead. You can continue now.
I don't know what the home situation's like. I don't want to destabilize anything. I'm just being honest. I'm trying to be intellectually honest with you guys.
All good.
But other than that, I don't think she would be affected by our plan. But as I said, I just think it's important to be clear about definitions and what we believe Canadians are, just because we've gone through these last few decades of them trying to transform it into something else. So I think it's important to put our foot down, especially because ultimately our goal is to it's not just to deport non-white people, right? Our goal is to preserve Canada's ethnocultural identity. We believe that Canada is the way that it is because of the people. It's not because of some magic dirt. Like, Canada was very different before the European settlers arrived, when it was just populated by, uncoordinated indigenous tribes. And Canada would have been something very different if it was colonized by the Japanese or by the Russians or by the Chinese or whatnot. Canada is only the way that it is now because it was settled by the English, the French, the Scottish, the Irish, this European basis, which makes the bedrock of Canadian culture. So as such, we're seeing it transform into something very different as our demographics transform, and as Indians become a more and more significant part of the pie chart. So we want to prevent this transformation. We don't want Canadians to become a minority in Canada, and that's the kind of foundation of our remigration plan. So we have to understand who we are in order to defend what we are, right? So that's why we put our foot down in such a firm way. But again, the remigration plan isn't based on ethnicity in how we target people. It's based off of integration and legal status and so on.
So let's say that I understand your point. I get what you're saying. I'm happy that you answered that we were able to have that conversation. It doesn't seem by your plan that there's a specific, like, she's gonna have to walk around with a Star of David on her chest to say that she's different. So as much as I don't agree with your definition of being a Canadian, I appreciate that she took the time to explain it, and it seems that I'm not getting rid of my wife that way. So she doesn't need to be running, right? Maybe it's me that wants to send her back. I'm just saying. But is there a slippery slope? Because that's always what happens, right? Yeah. Is there kind of a slippery slope? Because that's always my main concern. There's a lot of ideas out there. Like, communism in principle is fucking awesome. But as soon as you put human behavior into it, you understand how evil communism actually is, and you know why it has killed over 100 million people in the last century. But on paper, what you're talking about is great. Like, all up to now, as I said on Saturday, 90% of what you said, maybe, like, I'm just throwing a number out there because I didn't check mark everything you said, agree, disagree, but most of what you said I agree with. I think Rob is the same. But what would it mean? Would there be any repercussion for the people that are actually assimilating? Because there's one thing that you didn't talk about that I want to talk about, because I think there's part of your plans. I would go even further than what you proposed. But for the people that have assimilated, like, let's say my wife's father, for the people that came here, that work, that are part of a system that understands what it is they believe in what Canada believes in, whatever the fuck the definition is. Now today is kind of hard to put on paper, but they're contributing. They didn't take advantage of a system, they participated, and culturally they want to be Canadian, which is what immigration should be about. If it makes the country a better place while respecting the culture, to me it makes sense. But what do we do with the people out there that, as you were describing earlier, kids of immigrants or immigrants that are here, that came here legally because of the open door policies that we've had, the open border policies that we've had over the past 15 years, give or take, that have been here, they're somewhat taking advantage of us, of our system, or they're just not integrating. They have no intentions of integrating. They're here to take advantage of a system, and they're trying, because we're seeing that, and let's call a spade a spade. I'm especially talking about Muslim values here, because as a Christian, there's a lot of Muslims that come here not because they want to live in a Christian country. They come here because it's a Christian country, and they understand that they can associate with the woke left in order to pass their ballot over the bullet, as they say. I'm sure you know the expression. So part of your policies, would there be a system in there to not only take care of the new immigration once the immigration's reopened, but how do we address the people that are here? They're not here to assimilate. They're not here to make this place better, as in stay the same, just more profitable. They're here to change it to something that Canada is not, that has never been, and should not become.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And as I said, we already have mechanisms to kind of enforce assimilation, right? It's kind of a carrot and a stick kind of situation where we're gonna. Right now, Canada does like. We don't have a very strong culture, right? We kind of believe in these multicultural ideas, and we believe that anyone can be Canadian, all these things. The first step is to put our foot down and to understand what a Canadian is and what our culture is. There needs to be something for people to assimilate into. And a big part of that is our Christian identity. In phase one, we do have a basket of policies that I kind of went over quickly, but I didn't mention or didn't drill into some of the religious aspects of these things. I did mention that we want to kind of import the Quebec bill that would ban religious symbols in the public service and education and the public service and so on. But we also introduce ideas like banning things like kosher and halal slaughter. These things that have become, they're kind of barbaric cultural practices that have become normalized in Canada. I do believe that we need to push back on these kind of foreign religions that are kind of walking into our very liberal society and using things like left-wing parties to normalize their worldview. And many of them very explicitly have this position that they're going to outbreed us and take over Canada to implement Sharia law in these things. I don't think we should just like kind of turn our heads to this and think that, oh, it'll never happen because we have the best ideas or whatever. No, we should take this as a hostile threat to our, an existential threat to our existence, and punish these people accordingly. So this is what I mean when I say revoking permanent residency and naturalized citizenship for people that are threatening our social cohesion, these people that are pushing these foreign ideas and trying to transform our culture into something that it isn't, it never has been, and it shouldn't be in the future. The mainstream position in Canada is this very like cultural relativism that everyone's equal, everyone's ideas, maybe you don't understand, but they're just as good as your ideas. And I say no. Like Canada is a great country. Yep. Because of the Canadian people, because of our Christian foundations, because of all these things, not in spite of them. And we must enforce that, or else it's going to transform into something else and something much worse. So we need to be proud. There's this culture of shame in Canada, right? We're so ashamed of our colonial
self-hate,
past, and
you might say.
Yeah, exactly. And white guilt and all this. Like, no, stop it. I am proud to be a white person. I'm proud to be a Canadian person. We have an incredible history that we need to defend and preserve. And we need to stop being walked over by all these foreign ethnic groups and foreign religious groups who are just taking advantage of our kind of universalist liberal position in order to advance their own ethno-religious goals. I'm like, no more of this. We're standing up for who we are and what we want to be. We're kicking people out, or we're enforcing the way that things are in Canada. Things like halal and kosher slaughter. This is not the way we do things in Canada. We stun animals before we kill them to eat them. That's just how we do things. And I won't apologize for enforcing these ethno-religious norms.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, and I agree with everything you're saying there. When you say, you know, we need to stop being walked over by sort of these like foreign groups, I actually think the people who are most at fault is the left. It's the political left who is allowing these other groups. These other groups would not be coming here and doing this if they weren't invited to by the woke left, the far left, right? And you know, I think you hit the nail on the head. It really is a self-hating ideology. It isn't. They're not even against colonization, right? We hear that all the time. They're against Western colonization, but they have nothing to say about, say, Arab colonization. Every single Arab outside of present-day Saudi Arabia or Yemen is a colonizer. Any Arab in North Africa, in Palestine even, they are all absolutely the descendants of colonizers, but you never hear anything about that, right? So we know it's not really about colonization. It's not about anything. It's just about self-hate. They hate everything to do with the West, and that means whiteness, Christianity. And I say that as an atheist. I'm not a Christian, but I understand that we grew up, we have Judeo-Christian values. That's what our society is founded on. And the woke far left, they just hate everything to do with the West. And we need to be able to say, no, push back on that.
Yeah, I think it's critical. And I think it's a big problem that drives things like apathy and low voter turnout. Like there's no one offering this kind of unapologetic view of society, that this alternative kind of philosophical framework for how we should govern ourselves. Right now, the whole political spectrum in Canada and most Western countries is, a choice between left liberals, the liberals, or right liberals, the conservatives. What we offer is a truly nationalist position, something that's like truly on the right. If you're going to break down a more honest political spectrum. And like, I believe they're common sense ideas. I believe that kind of nationalism can kind of transcend the divide as we know it, and can appeal to people on the left and on the right, as we've kind of seen throughout this call. But really, I think that's what drives so much apathy. Like there isn't a real alternative worldview. It's just like quibbling about tax rates and the size of government and these things that people find rather unimportant in the grand scheme of things. What people really want is a someone with a bold alternative vision to the status quo to drag the country in a different direction, not to different rates of decline, which is kind of what we have on offer now.
I want to address one of the comments that was made, because we've received a lot of comments that there's no way we can address a lot of them, but Phantom the Paradise is saying white people are only somewhere between 6 and 8% of the global population with birth below replacement level. This reality alone justifies remigration. This is not accurate. I did the calculation myself. I spent hours last week figuring that one out. It's not 6 to 8. It's more like 10 to 12. Is the more accurate number. I'm a math person, so when I see inaccurate numbers, I'm not saying that it's much better. 10 to 12% is not much, considering that 125 years ago, we were 25% of the world population. Now we literally lost more than half just over a century. So I'm not saying your numbers are that wrong. It's worse than you think, but we're about 10 to 12%. And, we're so brainwashed here in North America thinking that as the average Canadian, the average people that lives in North America, how much of the world population are white people, like descendant of Caucasians from Europe? People think 50, 60%. No. It's more like 10 to 12, and it's closer to 10 than it is to 12. So there's nothing wrong to me being white. I don't have a problem with being white. On the contrary, I don't see myself as anything else than what I am. But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with saying that you want to keep your culture alive, because one of the conversations that is not had is what it is to be Canadian by culture. And if you go back 400 or 500 years ago and you try to imagine the settlers that came here, what they had to go through, imagine surviving a minus 40 Celsius winter with no technology. That's the type of people that we had here. We had some of the toughest people on the planet. People don't understand that Canada we're somewhere equal with the northern parts of Russia, but we have some of the biggest span of temperature, from the plus 35 that we get in our summers to the minus 40 that we get in our winters. I think we're number 2 in the world for the biggest span of temperature. So we are tough people by nature. We take this for granted, but this is not fucking normal what's going on outside right now. The average person that does not live in Canada, this ain't fucking normal, our winter. So we come from very tough people. We come from people that were able to survive because we stuck together, because we had similar values, we had the same religion, we believed in the same thing, and our religion kind of tells us to help one another. And this is what we come from, and this is something that we don't talk about enough. Canadians have forgotten how tough our ancestors were to even survive here. So
Yeah,
is
yeah,
it is it racist for me to say that? No, it's not. And I will never apologize for saying this because it is a fucking fact. So this is
Yeah.
not racist whatsoever. But that being said, there's one more point I want to bring up to you because I saw it somewhere in the comments. I don't know who said it, but what about First Nations? Where do First Nations fit in that whole spectrum of being Canadian?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Hmm.
So we've talked a lot. This is the red ensign, right? This is Canada's old flag. So we've talked a lot about the top four quadrants there, the representing the English, the Scottish, the French, and the Irish and the French. But those three leaves below it represent Canada's three founding people. So the Anglo-Canadians, the Franco-Canadians, and the First Nations. The reality is, in Canada, European settlement would have never taken off if it wasn't for collaborations with the First Nations people. Our history with the Indigenous is very different than that of the Americans, which was much more violent. Ours is a history of collaboration, both to establish settlement in Canada, but also to maintain that settlement against the Americans. Things like the Battle of 1812 were only won through collaboration with local Indigenous tribes. So I very much see them as crucial to Canadian identity, while they are ethnically distinct from the kind of ethnic Canadians as we described them earlier. Obviously, these people have their own kind of separate nations that they have maintained kind of ethnic purity within. I do see them as a crucial part of the overall Canadian project. And really, I want to forge a more perfect partnership between Canada's three founding peoples, the Anglo-Canadians, the Franco-Canadians, and the First Nations, in order to kind of stand together for our common identity and push for remigration to protect that common identity. It does get kind of complicated because in the very contemporary context, we've been foisted with this bizarre kind of reconciliation narrative, which is, very apologist for colonialization. It's based on the lies like the situation in Kamloops. So sometimes I'll be caught in inflammatory rhetoric about relations with the Indigenous, but ultimately I do view them as Canadian, and I believe we do need to work together, collaborate as we have in the past in order to accomplish our shared goals, which I think they can openly embrace. I think they'll be even more eager to embrace concepts like remigration than maybe some normie Anglo or Franco Canadians.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. I feel like it's just from a purely branding perspective or marketing perspective. I think it's, as you sort of go on in your mission and keep pushing this, I think it'll provide a very effective and powerful argument against undoubtedly the people who are going to say that, you guys are racist. All this stuff is about, white supremacy and things that the left has been, saying for a long time very effectively. They've been able to shut down a lot of discussion and debate and discourse with these bad faith attacks. And I think that's an excellent point to add to your overall plan.
So I got one more question for you before I let you go, and it's about, because you brought up the red inks, and I'm just looking at, I understand what you mean by it, by looking at the flag. It all makes sense. The part that I'm very curious about, where do you think that the UK fits in this? Because still a big portion of the red insing is a massive portion that represents the ancestry that we have from England. Do you think that Canada, in the perfect world, if your policies ever come to place, that Canada should still be under the Commonwealth?
So so the Commonwealth countries are all going through very similar problems right now, and I think they all desperately need remigration.
That's why I'm asking.
Now, I'm very skeptical about plans like CANZUK an updated union between Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and the UK as things stand, because a lot of the time things like mobility rights are included in that, and that would just make the situation much more messy. I think once we can solve our problems here, I think remigration will require a lot of diplomatic international diplomacy in order to accomplish it. And given all these countries are going through similar things, I think that we could form a union in order to have more leverage in things like international agreements and forming things like third countries for deportations of illegals and asylum claimants and stuff like this. There's things like the UK's Rwanda plan that has designating a country like Rwanda as a safe third country where illegals could be removed and processed instead of housing them in countries like Canada or the UK or so on. So I think there's room for international collaboration, and in doing so, it's most obvious to work with the countries that are most historically and culturally, ethnically similar to us, like the Commonwealth countries. But we can't turn back the clock, right? The reorientation of Canada really hinges around the Second World War, because pre-war period, we were very much a vassal state of the United Kingdom. After the World Wars, we saw the United Kingdom kind of fall off as the global hegemon and be replaced by the Americans. And at the same time, we kind of fell into the American sphere, and now we've become a sort of vassal state of the Americans. So we can't just like untether ourselves from the US and latch back onto the UK. Like, that's just not realistic given the kind of global power dynamics and the global economy and so on. We kind of have to stand on our own. Although I think we should always maintain ties with the other Commonwealth countries, just out of pragmatism, but also history. So it's a kind of a nuanced situation, I'd say. But once we reconquer this country, I think we do have some duty to help our brothers out around the world in reconquering theirs.
Interesting point. I just came up with a question now as you were talking about it, and I was looking at the flag because I never really I never taken the time to actually look at it. But as you're talking about it, I can see the different the signals, the images that are on the flag all make sense. It's just that one is bigger than the rest too, right? So that's why I was asking. I don't know, Rob, but we've been going for about an hour and a half, so I appreciate your time, Daniel. I appreciate you coming back after kind of the mess of Saturday, so I appreciate you being back here, even if there's some things we don't agree with. That's the whole point of the show, right? Like we've said multiple times, is to have at least to start that conversation and see where the chip falls. But yeah, I appreciate your time, man. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time. And yeah, Rob, I'll just throw it to you. I'm pretty much done for questions right now.
Yeah, no, again, appreciate that, Daniel. Appreciate your time. Excellent conversation. I think, I feel like I learned something. I think the audience did a lot of positive comments. Guys, if you're out there listening, remember to like and share the stream. That's a way that you can help us with the algorithm. But Daniel, we'll let you go, and then we'll do our close up. But really appreciate your time. Really informative conversation. I really enjoyed it. And hopefully we can have you on again sometime again soon.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me on, guys. It was nice to get to go a bit more in depth than we were able to the other day. I think there was a big appetite for it after our discussion. So
yes, exactly.
I was happy to come back on and drill into things. I do encourage anyone that's listening, that's liked what they heard to follow me on X. My handle's right there at the bottom, but also to follow the Dominion Society. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, at Dominion Soc, and really go check out our website, dominionsociety.ca. That's where you can find all the additional information on remigration, on Canadian nationalism, and if you support what we're doing, you can sign up to become a member or make a small donation to help fuel our fight, or to get involved as a volunteer in your own community. We're building up a volunteer infrastructure from coast to coast and engaging in things like flyering and postering campaigns, as well as rallies and demonstrations. So if that is interesting to you, you can sign up as a member on our website.
By the way, Dan, if you want
Appreciate
to
that.
just stick around, I'll just put you back in the back room. If you want to
Yep.
just stick around, I just want to make sure that you're all uploaded from your side so that we can create content around this. But yeah, thanks a lot. And you know what? Happy New Year in advance.
Yeah. Happy New Year, guys.
Yeah, you too, sir. All right, guys, we're gonna put a pin in it there. Went a little longer than usual, but you know, when you're really having a good discussion, I don't think you want to interrupt. You want to let that go. We were talking to Daniel Tyrie there of the Dominion Society of Canada, you know, about remigration, which is admittedly a very loaded word, but this is why we have these talks, because I think when you get into it and you see the policies, there's a whole lot of common ground there, no matter whether you're on the right or the left, as long as you believe in common sense and you actually understand that this is a problem that we need to solve. Guys, that's going to be it for us for tonight and the week. We are heading into
Not the week.
Wait,
Thursday.
No, we're back tomorrow.
We're here
night, right?
Thursday, buddy.
No, that's right.
No, tomorrow is 31st,
more,
so
yeah.
Rob needs to go out. Rob needs to go out and party, try to
Oh,
find a chick to
Yes.
do
we
chicka
gotta
bang
party.
bang. But
No, I'm actually working. I'm working. I'm bouncing.
Oh
at the
yeah,
club,
right.
so.
You're the mini
Pacifico, we're in
bouncer.
Halifax, Nova Scotia.
You're the mini bouncer. I forgot.
If the girls cause trouble, they send me. Come on.
No, the gay guys. Let's be honest. Let's be honest. You deal with the gay guys. Hey Rob, gay guy over there. Escort that guy out.
All the French Canadians.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Guys,
right.
so yeah,
we'll see you on Thursday. Not tomorrow, but Thursday.
Yes, that's right. We're going to take a short pause for tomorrow night. We'll be back Thursday, and that'll cap off the week. Guys, if you are tuning in for the first time, welcome to the Political Orphans. This is the place where common sense left and right gets together, and we can have these kind of really important discussions, because there aren't that many places out there that we're able to really get into the weeds like we are here. If you support what Nico and I are doing, if you want to help build the community, you can do that by becoming a member through the YouTube channel for the low price of $2.99 per month. You can also support us by buying us a coffee in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Other than that, folks, we will catch you guys on Thursday. Have a great rest of your night. Have a great New Year's Eve, and be safe out there.
Peace.
Peace.